Question 1. Consider a manufacturer of construction insulation material who wishes to include a claim about the significant use of post-consumer recycled glass in their product within a Type Roman III environmental declaration, prepared according to ISO 14025-2006. The manufacturer has documentation from their supplier indicating the weight percentage of recycled glass in the raw material feedstock. However, the recycling process involves some material loss, and the exact percentage of this post-consumer recycled glass that actually ends up in the final insulation product, after processing and manufacturing, is not directly metered. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of ISO 14025-2006 for substantiating this recycled content claim in the EPD? Option A. The EPD can simply state that the product contains recycled content without specifying the type or percentage, relying on the overall environmental performance data to imply its presence. Option B. The EPD should use an average industry benchmark for recycled content conversion efficiency in similar manufacturing processes to estimate the final product's recycled content, without specific verification of the manufacturer's own process losses. Option C. The manufacturer must conduct a specific, verifiable process audit to quantify the actual percentage of post-consumer recycled glass incorporated into the final insulation product, and this verified figure must be used in the EPD. Option D. The EPD should clearly state the percentage of post-consumer recycled glass in the raw material feedstock, as provided by the supplier, with a footnote referencing the supplier's documentation and acknowledging potential process losses not quantified in the EPD. Correct answer is D. The EPD should clearly state the percentage of post-consumer recycled glass in the raw material feedstock, as provided by the supplier, with a footnote referencing the supplier's documentation and acknowledging potential process losses not quantified in the EPD. Explanation. The core principle of ISO 14025-2006 regarding recycled content and secondary materials within Type Roman III environmental declarations, EPD, is to ensure transparency and verifiability. When a manufacturer claims the use of recycled or secondary materials, the standard mandates that the origin, quantity, and quality of these materials must be clearly defined and substantiated. This is crucial for the credibility of the EPD. The EPD program operator, following the principles of ISO 14025, must establish clear rules for the verification of such claims. These rules typically involve requiring documentation that traces the material from its source, confirming its classification as recycled or secondary according to relevant standards, e.g., ISO 14040 series for life cycle assessment or specific regional definitions, and ensuring that the use of these materials is accurately reflected in the product's environmental performance data. The focus is on the integrity of the data presented to avoid misleading claims and to allow informed comparisons by users of the EPD. The standard emphasizes that the quantification of recycled content should be based on verified inputs and that the environmental benefits attributed to these materials should be supported by the life cycle assessment, LCA, conducted for the EPD. Without a robust verification process for the claimed recycled content, the EPD would fail to meet the standard's requirement for reliability and comparability. Question 2. When developing a Type Roman III environmental declaration for a novel composite building material, which component of the life cycle assessment, LCA, process is primarily responsible for gathering and quantifying all relevant environmental inputs and outputs, such as raw material extraction, energy consumption, and emissions to air, water, and soil, as stipulated by ISO 14025-2006. Option A. Life Cycle Inventory LCI Analysis. Option B. Goal and Scope Definition. Option C. Life Cycle Interpretation. Option D. Life Cycle Impact Assessment LCA. Correct answer is A. Life Cycle Inventory LCI Analysis. Explanation. The core principle of a Type Roman III environmental declaration EPD under ISO 14025-2006 is to provide quantified environmental information based on a life cycle assessment LCA. Specifically, the life cycle inventory LCI analysis is the data collection and measurement phase of the LCA. This phase involves quantifying the inputs and outputs of a product system throughout its life cycle, including energy requirements, material inputs, and environmental releases. For an EPD, The LCI data must be robust, transparent, and verifiable. The selection of relevant environmental indicators for the EPD is guided by the Product Category Rules, PCR, which are developed through a multi-stakeholder process. These PCRs ensure comparability between EPDs for similar products. The LCI data collected is then used in the Life Cycle Impact Assessment, LCIA, phase to estimate potential environmental impacts. However, the EPD itself is a declaration of the LCI results, presented in a standardized format, and does not inherently include the interpretation or evaluation of these impacts beyond what is required by the PCR. Therefore, the LCI analysis is the foundational element that provides the objective, quantified data for the declaration. Question 3. Consider a manufacturer of sustainable building materials that has developed a Type Roman III environmental declaration, EPD, for its new composite wood product. The underlying life cycle assessment, LCA, indicates a significant contribution to global warming potential, GWP, primarily from the energy consumed during the manufacturing stage, specifically from the combustion of fossil fuels in their on-site power generation. The EPD, as per ISO 14025-2006 principles, aims to communicate this environmental performance transparently. What is the primary focus of the interpretation phase of the LCA results as they are presented in this Type Roman III EPD? Option A. Quantifying the recycled content of the product and presenting this as the sole indicator of its environmental benefit in the EPD. Option B. Highlighting the specific energy efficiency improvements made in the manufacturing process compared to industry averages, without detailing the total GWP. Option C. Focusing solely on the end-of-life scenarios for the composite wood product, as this is often the most critical phase for material disposal. Option D. Evaluating the overall environmental profile of the composite wood product across its life cycle, with a specific emphasis on the manufacturing stage's GWP contribution and the underlying data's reliability. The correct answer is D. Evaluating the overall environmental profile of the composite wood product across its life cycle, with a specific emphasis on the manufacturing stage's GWP contribution and the underlying data's reliability. Explanation. The core principle of ISO 14025-2006 regarding Type Roman III environmental declarations, EPD, is that they are based on a comprehensive life cycle assessment, LCA. The standard mandates that the LCA conducted must adhere to the requirements of ISO 14040 and ISO 14044. These foundational LCA standards define the framework for conducting an LCA, including goal and scope definition, life cycle inventory analysis, LCI, life cycle impact assessment, LCIA, and interpretation. For a Type Roman III EPD, the LCIA phase is particularly crucial as it translates the inventory data into potential environmental impacts. The interpretation of these LCA results within the context of an EPD involves evaluating the robustness of the data, identifying the significant environmental aspects, and communicating these findings transparently. This process is overseen by a verification body to ensure compliance with the EPD program operator's requirements and the ISO 14025 standard itself. Therefore, the validity and representativeness of the underlying LCA, specifically its impact assessment results, are paramount for the credibility of the Type Roman III EPD. The standard emphasizes that the EPD should present the results of the LCA clearly, allowing for informed comparisons and decisions without making comparative assertions unless specific conditions are met. The interpretation must focus on the environmental performance of the product system across its life cycle stages as determined by the LCA, ensuring that the information provided is factual and not misleading. Question 4. Consider a consortium of manufacturers producing composite building materials. They aim to develop a Type Roman III environmental declaration for their products to comply with emerging regulations mandating transparent environmental performance data for construction inputs. To ensure the comparability and scientific robustness of their future environmental declarations, what is the most critical foundational step they must undertake? As outlined by ISO 14025-2006 principles. Option A. obtain certification for their individual products under an existing environmental management system like ISO 14001. Option B. Establish and publish product category rules, PCR, that define the methodology for conducting life cycle assessments for composite building materials. Option C. Develop a unique marketing campaign highlighting the general environmental benefits of their composite materials. Option D. Commission a single, comprehensive life cycle assessment for a representative product from each manufacturer. The correct answer is B. Establish and publish product category rules, PCR, that define the methodology for conducting life cycle assessments for composite building materials. Explanation: the development and application of product category rules, PCR, are fundamental to ensuring the comparability and credibility of Type III environmental declarations under ISO 14025-2006. PCRs establish the specific requirements for conducting a life cycle assessment, LCA, for a particular product category, ensuring that the environmental impacts are assessed consistently across all products within that category. This consistency is vital for enabling consumers and business partners to make informed comparisons. The primary purpose of a PCR is to define the scope, functional unit, system boundaries, allocation procedures, impact assessment methodologies, and data requirements for an LCA of products within a defined category. Without standardized PCRs, different LCA studies for similar products could use vastly different assumptions and methodologies, rendering any direct comparison meaningless. Furthermore, PCRs serve as a basis for the verification of Type III environmental declarations by independent third parties, adding a layer of assurance regarding the accuracy and integrity of the declared environmental information. They also guide the development of environmental product declarations, EPD, which are the output of the Type III labeling system. The PCR ensures that the EPD accurately reflects the environmental performance of the product based on a scientifically sound and agreed-upon methodology for its specific product group. Question 5. When evaluating the comparability of Type III environmental declarations for different brands of architectural paint, what fundamental requirement, as stipulated by ISO 14025-2006, ensures that the presented environmental data allows for meaningful cross-brand analysis and informed purchasing decisions, assuming all paints are intended for similar application and performance characteristics? Option A. Each declaration must include a disclaimer stating that direct comparison with other brands is not possible due to proprietary manufacturing processes and varying regional environmental regulations. Option B. The declarations must be developed in accordance with the same or equivalent product category rules, PCR, that define consistent life cycle assessment methodologies and impact categories for architectural paints. Option C. Manufacturers must independently verify their EPDs through a third-party auditor, who is also responsible for harmonizing the data across all competing products in the market. Option D. The declarations should primarily focus on showcasing the lowest reported impact in the most commonly advertised environmental categories, irrespective of the PCR used. The correct answer is B. The declarations must be developed in accordance with the same or equivalent product category rules, PCR, that define consistent life cycle assessment methodologies and impact categories for architectural paints. Explanation: ISO 14025-2006, specifically in its principles for Type III environmental declarations, EPD, emphasizes comparability and relevance. Comparability, as defined by the standard, is achieved when EPDs for similar products are based on the same or equivalent PCRs, product category rules, and use consistent calculation methodologies, allowing consumers and businesses to make informed comparisons. Relevance dictates that the environmental information presented in an EPD must be pertinent to the significant environmental impacts of the product throughout its life cycle, as identified by the PCR. The standard mandates that PCRs should define the system boundaries, impact categories, and calculation methods to ensure that EPDs for products within the same category are comparable. Without adherence to a common PCR, EPDs for identical products from different manufacturers could present data calculated using disparate methods or focusing on different environmental aspects, rendering direct comparison misleading or impossible. This lack of comparability undermines the purpose of EPDs as a tool for environmental purchasing decisions and market transparency. The standard also acknowledges that, while EPDs aim for comparability within a product category, they are not intended to be comparative assertions against other products from different categories or against non-EPD products without further context and specific verification. Therefore, the core principle is that comparability is achieved through standardized PCRs and consistent application of life cycle assessment methodologies for products within the same defined category. Question 6. A consortium is tasked with developing product category rules, PCR, for a new generation of biodegradable packaging materials. They have identified potential environmental impacts across the entire life cycle, from raw material extraction to end-of-life disposal. To ensure the PCR is robust and widely accepted, which of the following approaches best embodies the stakeholder involvement principles mandated by ISO 14025-2006 for PCR development, considering the need for diverse perspectives and technical rigor? Option A. Engaging a single, independent third-party auditor to review the proposed PCR and validate its technical accuracy without direct input from other stakeholder groups. Option B. Establishing a technical working group composed solely of material scientists and manufacturing engineers to define the critical environmental parameters and assessment methodologies. Option C. Relying exclusively on existing environmental impact assessment databases and governmental regulations to dictate the content of the PCR, with minimal direct engagement with external parties. Option D. Organizing a series of public consultation workshops, inviting manufacturers, environmental advocacy groups, academic researchers, and consumer representatives to provide feedback on draft PCR documents. The correct answer is B. Establishing a technical working group composed solely of material scientists and manufacturing engineers to define the critical environmental parameters and assessment methodologies. Explanation. ISO 14025-2006 emphasizes the importance of stakeholder involvement in the development of product category rules, PCR, to ensure their credibility, transparency, and comprehensiveness. Stakeholders are defined as individuals or groups who have an interest in or are affected by the environmental declarations. This includes manufacturers, suppliers, consumers, non-governmental organizations, government agencies, and scientific experts. The standard outlines that the PCR development process should actively seek input from these diverse groups. This engagement helps to identify relevant environmental aspects for a product category, define appropriate impact categories and assessment methodologies, and establish clear, verifiable procedures for data collection and reporting. The goal is to create PCRs that are technically sound, reflect societal values, and are practical for industry implementation. Without broad stakeholder consensus, a PCR may be perceived as biased or incomplete, undermining the reliability of the Type Roman III environmental declarations derived from it. For instance, if consumer groups are not consulted, the PCR might not address key environmental concerns that are important to end users, leading to a declaration that lacks market relevance. Similarly, if regulatory bodies are not involved, the PCR might not align with existing or anticipated legal frameworks. Therefore, a structured approach to stakeholder consultation, including public comment periods and advisory committees, is a cornerstone of robust PCR development under ISO 14025-2006. Question 7. Consider a scenario where a Type Roman III Environmental Declaration Program operator for recycled plastic packaging is developing its procedures for validating the environmental data submitted by manufacturers. The program operator must ensure that the data used to populate the Environmental Product Declaration, EPD, accurately reflects the product's life cycle impacts. Which of the following data quality indicators, as defined by ISO 14025-2006, is most critical for ensuring that the declared environmental performance is not skewed by excluding significant environmental aspects of the packaging's use and disposal phases, thereby providing a truly representative picture of its environmental footprint? Option A, representativeness. Option B, completeness. Option C, accuracy. Option D, verifiability. The correct answer is A, representativeness. Explanation. The core principle of ISO 14025-2006 regarding Type Roman III environmental declarations is the transparent and verifiable communication of environmental performance. This standard emphasizes the importance of data quality indicators to ensure the reliability and credibility of the information presented. Completeness refers to the extent to which all relevant environmental impacts within the defined system boundary are accounted for. Accuracy pertains to the degree to which the data reflects the true environmental performance of the product or service, free from significant error or bias. Representativeness signifies that the data collected is typical of the product or service's life cycle stages and geographical scope, avoiding uncharacteristic or misleading information. A Type Roman III program operator must establish and document procedures for data validation and verification, ensuring that the data underpinning the environmental declaration meets these quality criteria. Failure to adequately address these indicators undermines the comparability and trustworthiness of the declaration, potentially misleading stakeholders and contravening the intent of the standard. For instance, if a declaration for a manufactured good omits significant energy consumption during its use phase, it lacks completeness and representativeness, rendering its overall environmental profile incomplete and potentially inaccurate. Similarly, if the data used for emissions is based on outdated or nonspecific methodologies, its accuracy would be questionable. The ultimate goal is to provide a robust and credible environmental profile that allows informed decision-making by purchasers and other stakeholders. Question 8. When developing an environmental product declaration, EPD, for a novel composite material used in aerospace manufacturing, the primary data collection for certain raw material inputs and energy consumption at the manufacturing stage proves to be prohibitively complex and costly due to the proprietary nature of some supplier processes and the specialized equipment involved. Considering the principles of ISO 14025-2006, which approach to data sourcing would be most aligned with the standard's requirements for reliability and comparability, while acknowledging the practical constraints. Option A. Substitute primary data with expert opinions and qualitative assessments for the challenging stages, as these insights can provide a general understanding of the environmental impacts without requiring precise quantification. Option B. Rely exclusively on generic industry benchmarks for all life cycle stages, even if they do not closely reflect the specific technologies and geographical locations of the composite materials production, to ensure a broadly applicable declaration. Option C. Exclude the life cycle stages with data collection difficulties from the EPD, focusing only on the stages where primary data is readily available, thereby simplifying the declaration process. Option D. Utilize representative secondary data from established life cycle inventory databases for similar composite materials and manufacturing processes, ensuring clear documentation of the data sources, assumptions made in their application, and justification for their representativeness to the specific aerospace composite. The correct answer is D. Utilize representative secondary data from established life cycle inventory databases for similar composite materials and manufacturing processes, ensuring clear documentation of the data sources, assumptions made in their application, and justification for their representativeness to the specific aerospace composite. Explanation. The core principle of ISO 14025-2006 regarding data sources for Type Roman III environmental declarations is the emphasis on reliability, comparability, and transparency. While primary data collected directly from the manufacturing process of the product system under review is ideal for its specificity and direct relevance, the standard acknowledges the necessity and validity of using secondary data under certain conditions. Secondary data, such as industry averages, databases, or literature values, can be used when primary data is unavailable, impractical to obtain, or would introduce undue burden. However, the critical requirement for secondary data is that it must be representative of the specific product system and its life cycle stages being declared. This means that the secondary data must be as relevant as possible to the geographical region, technological processes, and operational conditions of the product system. Furthermore, the source and any assumptions made in adapting secondary data must be clearly documented and justified within the Environmental Product Declaration EPD. The standard also mandates that the chosen data should be the most appropriate available for the specific impact categories being assessed, ensuring consistency and comparability across different EPDs. The selection process should prioritize data that reflects the actual environmental performance of the product system, even when using generalized information. Question 9. What is the fundamental role of a program operator within the framework established by ISO 14025-2006 for Type Roman III environmental declarations, particularly in ensuring the integrity and comparability of environmental information? Option A. To develop marketing strategies for products that have obtained Type Roman III environmental declarations, focusing on consumer appeal. Option B. To lobby regulatory bodies for the mandatory adoption of specific environmental product certifications across all industries. Option C. To conduct independent life cycle assessments for individual products and publish the results directly to the market without further oversight. Option D. To define product categories, establish environmental impact categories, and set rules for life cycle assessment and verification to ensure transparency and comparability. The correct answer is D. To define product categories, establish environmental impact categories, and set rules for life cycle assessment and verification to ensure transparency and comparability. Explanation. The core principle of ISO 14025-2006 concerning Type Roman III environmental declarations is transparency and comparability. This is achieved through the establishment of program operators who oversee the development and verification of these declarations. These program operators are responsible for defining the product categories, establishing the critical environmental impact categories, and setting the rules for conducting life cycle assessments, LCA, that form the basis of the declarations. A key aspect of their role is ensuring that the data used is credible and that the methodology applied is consistent and scientifically sound. This facilitates fair comparison between products that are functionally equivalent. The standard emphasizes that the program operator's procedures must be documented and publicly available, allowing stakeholders to understand the basis of the declarations. Furthermore, the program operator is responsible for the verification process, ensuring that the product-specific declarations comply with the established program rules and the requirements of the ISO 14025 standard. This rigorous oversight is crucial for building trust and credibility in Type Roman III environmental declarations, allowing consumers and other stakeholders to make informed environmental choices based on reliable, quantified environmental information. The program operator's role is therefore foundational to the integrity of the entire Type Roman III environmental declaration system. Question 10. Consider a scenario where a manufacturer of biodegradable packaging materials intends to create a Type Roman III environmental declaration compliant with ISO 14025-2006. They are developing visual elements to accompany their quantified environmental data, which includes metrics for global warming potential and water consumption across the product's life cycle. Which of the following approaches for using graphics and visual aids would be most consistent with the principles and procedures of ISO 14025-2006? Option A. Utilizing abstract artistic representations of nature, such as flowing water or green leaves, alongside numerical data to evoke a positive environmental impression, even if these visuals are not directly tied to the specific quantified metrics. Option B. Presenting a stylized graph that shows a downward trend in environmental impact without clearly labeling the axes or units, relying on the viewer's general perception of downward as better to communicate the product's performance. Option C. Incorporating a prominent eco-friendly badge designed with a green checkmark superimposed over the product image to visually signal its environmental benefits, respective of whether this specific badge is part of an officially recognized certification scheme or directly explained by the LCA data. Option D. Employing a series of simple, clear charts and icons that directly correlate with the specific quantified LCA data presented in the declaration, ensuring no visual element implies a higher level of environmental performance than the data supports, and that these visuals are reviewed by the third-party verifier. The correct answer is D. Employing a series of simple, clear charts and icons that directly correlate with the specific quantified LCA data presented in the declaration, ensuring no visual element implies a higher level of environmental performance than the data supports, and that these visuals are reviewed by the third-party verifier. Explanation. The core principle of Type Roman III environmental declarations, as outlined in ISO 14025-2006, is to provide quantified environmental information based on life cycle assessment (LCA) data. These declarations are voluntary and are verified by a third party. The standard emphasizes transparency and comparability. Regarding the use of graphics and visual aids, ISO 14025, 2006 specifies that such elements should not mislead or misrepresent the environmental performance of the product. Specifically, the standard dictates that graphical representations should be consistent with the quantified data presented and should not imply environmental endorsements or certifications that are not supported by the underlying program and verification process. Visual aids must accurately reflect the results of the LCA and the Environmental Product Declaration (EPD) content, ensuring that consumers can make informed decisions without being deceived by unsubstantiated claims or misleading imagery. The purpose is to enhance understanding of complex LCA data without compromising its integrity. The standard does not mandate specific graphic styles, but requires that any visual element used, such as icons, charts, or diagrams, must be directly and truthfully representative of the declared environmental information, adhering to the principles of fair representation and avoiding any form of greenwashing. The verification process by a third party plays a crucial role in ensuring that these visual aids comply with the standard's requirements. Question 11. A manufacturing firm specializing in sustainable building materials is seeking to communicate the environmental performance of its new line of recycled content insulation. They are considering developing an environmental declaration that offers quantified data across multiple impact categories, verified by an independent body, and presented in a standardized format for easy comparison with competing products. Which category of environmental label, as defined by ISO 14020 series standards, best aligns with the firm's objectives for transparent and verifiable environmental performance communication? Option A. ISO 14021 Self-Declaration of Environmental Claims. Option B. Type I Eco-Label. Option C. Type Roman II Self-Declared Environmental Claim. Option D. Type Roman III Environmental Declaration. The correct answer is D. Type Roman III Environmental Declaration. Explanation. The core principle of a Type Roman III Environmental Declaration, as outlined in ISO 14025, 2006, is the provision of quantified environmental information based on a life cycle assessment, LCA. This information is verified by an independent third party and presented in a standardized format. Unlike Type I eco-labels, which focus on a single environmental attribute or a set of criteria for product groups, or Type Roman II self-declared claims, which are less rigorously verified, Type Roman III declarations offer a comprehensive, data-driven comparison of environmental impacts across various categories. The verification process ensures the accuracy and comparability of the data presented, making it a valuable tool for informed decision-making by businesses and consumers. The emphasis is on transparency and objectivity, allowing for more detailed understanding of a product's or service's environmental performance throughout its entire life cycle, from raw material extraction to end-of-life disposal. This aligns with the broader regulatory landscape, encouraging greater corporate environmental responsibility and product transparency, such as directives aimed at improving the energy efficiency of products or reducing hazardous substances. The comparability aspect is crucial, enabling stakeholders to evaluate different options based on a consistent set of environmental indicators. Question 12. Considering the principles outlined in ISO 14025, 2006 regarding Type Roman III environmental declarations, what is the fundamental aim of providing quantified, LCA-based environmental information for products and services? Option A. To establish mandatory minimum environmental standards that all products within a category must meet to be legally sold. Option B. Provide a qualitative assessment of a product's overall environmental friendliness, focusing on broad ecological claims. Option C. To enable objective comparison of environmental performance between similar products and services, facilitating informed decision-making by purchasers. Option D. To serve as a marketing instrument that guarantees a product's superior environmental credentials and ecological benefits. The correct answer is C. To enable objective comparison of environmental performance between similar products and services, facilitating informed decision-making by purchasers. Explanation. The core objective of a Type Roman III environmental declaration, as defined by ISO 14025-2006, is to provide quantified environmental information for products or services based on a life cycle assessment, LCA. This information is presented in a standardized format, allowing for objective comparison across similar products. The primary goal is to facilitate informed purchasing decisions by consumers and businesses who are seeking to reduce their environmental impact. It is not about mandating specific environmental performance levels, nor is it a certification of a product's overall environmental friendliness in a qualitative sense, nor is it a marketing tool to claim superior environmental attributes without verifiable data. Instead, it is a transparent communication mechanism for quantifiable environmental data throughout the product's life cycle, enabling users to make their own assessments and choices. This aligns with the broader aim of promoting environmentally preferable purchasing and fostering market-driven environmental improvements. The standard emphasizes comparability, credibility, and transparency of the disclosed environmental data. Question 13. Consider a scenario where a manufacturer of composite building materials is preparing a Type Roman III environmental declaration for their new product line, adhering to ISO 14025-2006 principles. Life cycle assessment, LCA data for this product was compiled using a combination of primary data from their own manufacturing facilities and secondary data from reputable industry databases for raw material extraction and transportation. During the independent third-party verification process, the verifier identifies a discrepancy in the allocation methodology used for a co-product in the LCA, which deviates from the established program operator's rules and the principles of ISO 14044. What is the primary implication of this finding for the verification process according to ISO 14025-2006? Option A. The verifier must immediately reject the entire LCA and EPD, forcing the manufacturer to restart the entire environmental declaration process from the beginning. Option B. The verifier should note the deviation in a footnote within the EPD, allowing for its publication with a disclaimer regarding the allocation methodology. Option C. The verifier can approve the EPD as is, provided the deviation is clearly stated in the EPD's summary section, as minor methodological differences are acceptable. Option D. The verifier must require the manufacturer to revise the LCA and the EPD to align with the program's allocation rules and ISO 14044, and then re-verify the updated documentation before the EPD can be published. The correct answer is D. The verifier must require the manufacturer to revise the LCA and the EPD to align with the program's allocation rules and ISO 14044, and then re-verify the updated documentation before the EPD can be published. Explanation. ISO 14025-2006, specifically in its clauses concerning Type Roman III environmental declarations, mandates rigorous data validation and verification procedures to ensure the credibility and reliability of the declared environmental information. The standard emphasizes that the underlying data used for the Environmental Product Declaration (EPD) must be scientifically sound, reproducible, and consistent with the established program's requirements and the relevant ISO standards, such as ISO 14040 and ISO 14044 for life cycle assessment. Verification is a critical step, typically performed by an independent third party, to confirm that the EPD and its supporting data comply with the principles and procedures outlined in ISO 14025 and the specific program operator's rules. This process involves reviewing the life cycle assessment, LCA study, the data collection methodologies, the calculation procedures, and the final EPD document. The verification ensures that the environmental information presented is accurate, transparent, and comparable, thereby preventing greenwashing and building trust among stakeholders. The verification process itself is subject to specific requirements within ISO 14025, including the competence of the verifier and the scope of the verification activities. The goal is to provide assurance that the EPD's content is free from significant misrepresentation and that the underlying data has been subjected to appropriate scrutiny. This is distinct from certification of the product itself, as it focuses on the environmental declaration's integrity. Question 14. When developing a Type Roman III environmental declaration, EPD, for a composite building material, what fundamental principle of reporting environmental performance indicators, EPI, under ISO 14025-2006 is paramount to enable meaningful comparison with similar products from different manufacturers? Option A. Prioritizing the inclusion of a broad range of qualitative environmental attributes in marketing claims, alongside quantitative EPIs, to provide a comprehensive environmental profile of the product. Option B. Focusing on reporting only the environmental impacts that are most favorable to the specific product, even if it means excluding certain life cycle stages or impact categories. Option C. Presenting EPIs using proprietary calculation methods and unique units of measurement specific to the manufacturer to highlight product differentiation and innovation. Option D. Ensuring that all reported EPIs are derived from a life cycle assessment, LCA, conducted according to ISO 14040 and ISO 14044, with clearly defined system boundaries, functional unit and allocation methods, and are presented in a standardized, verifiable format. The correct answer is D. Ensuring that all reported EPIs are derived from a life cycle assessment, LCA, conducted according to ISO 14040 and ISO 14044, with clearly defined system boundaries, functional unit and allocation methods, and are presented in a standardized, verifiable format. Explanation: the reporting of environmental performance indicators, EPI, within a Type Roman III environmental declaration, EPD, under ISO 14025-2006 is governed by specific principles to ensure comparability and transparency. The standard mandates that EPIs should be presented in a clear, concise, and consistent manner, allowing for straightforward comparison across similar products. Crucially, the quantification of these indicators must be based on a life cycle assessment, LCA, conducted according to relevant ISO standards, such as ISO 14040 and ISO 14044. The declaration must detail the system boundaries, functional unit, and allocation procedures used in the LCA, as these directly influence the reported EPI values. Furthermore, the standard emphasizes that the results should be presented in a format that facilitates understanding by the intended audience, typically business-to-business users. This includes specifying the units of measurement and providing context for the data. The verification process by an independent third party is also a critical component, ensuring the accuracy and reliability of the reported EPIs. Therefore, when a Type Roman III EPD is developed, the primary focus for reporting EPIs is to ensure they are derived from a robust LCA, clearly defined, consistently presented, and independently verified, enabling meaningful comparisons. Question 15. A manufacturer is developing a Type Roman III environmental declaration program for its range of building insulation materials, aiming for compliance with ISO 14025-2006. The program's underlying life cycle assessment data is robust and verified. However, during the review process, it is noted that some of the environmental performance indicators presented in the draft declaration could be interpreted as comparative claims, even though no direct comparisons are explicitly stated. Considering the principles of ISO 14025-2006 and the need to avoid conflicts with broader environmental marketing legislation, what is the most critical consideration for ensuring the program's compliance and integrity? Option A. Ensuring the program's product category rules, PCR, and the resulting declaration are consistent with and do not contradict any applicable national or international regulations governing environmental claims and product information, including those related to misleading advertising. Option B. Limiting the scope of the Type Roman III declaration to only those environmental aspects that are explicitly mandated by ISO 14025-2006, thereby avoiding any potential conflicts with other, unaddressed environmental marketing laws. Option C. Prioritizing the inclusion of the most favorable environmental performance indicators from the life cycle assessment to enhance the market appeal of the insulation materials, irrespective of broader regulatory frameworks. Option D. Focusing solely on the technical verification of the life cycle assessment data by a third party, assuming that such verification automatically guarantees compliance with all external legal requirements for environmental declarations. The correct answer is A. Ensuring the program's product category rules, PCR, and the resulting declaration are consistent with and do not contradict any applicable national or international regulations governing environmental claims and product information, including those related to misleading advertising. Explanation: the core principle of ISO 14025-2006 is the establishment of Type Roman III environmental declarations, which are voluntary programs that provide quantified environmental information based on a life cycle assessment, LCA. These declarations are subject to verification by a third party to ensure their accuracy and comparability. The standard emphasizes the importance of transparency and the use of objective, verifiable data. When considering alignment with other regulations, particularly those concerning product environmental claims, it is crucial that the Type Roman III declaration does not contradict or misrepresent information required by broader environmental marketing regulations. For instance, if a jurisdiction has specific rules about substantiating environmental claims or prohibits misleading statements under consumer protection laws, a Type Roman III declaration must operate within these boundaries. The standard itself does not mandate specific legal frameworks, but requires that the program and its declarations are consistent with relevant national and international laws that govern environmental claims and product information. Therefore, a Type Roman III program must ensure that its underlying LCA data and the resulting declaration are robust enough to withstand scrutiny under general advertising standards and specific environmental labeling regulations. The development of a Type Roman III program involves defining the product category rules, PCR, and conducting the LCA according to ISO 14040 and ISO 14044 series standards. The verification process is key to ensuring the credibility of the declaration. The alignment with existing legal frameworks, such as those governing unfair competition or deceptive practices, is a prerequisite for a credible Type Roman III environmental declaration program. Question 16. Consider a situation where a consortium of manufacturers is developing product category rules, PCR, for a new generation of building insulation materials, intending to create Type Roman III environmental declarations, EPD, compliant with ISO 14025-2006. To ensure the robustness and widespread acceptance of these PCRs, what is the most critical aspect of stakeholder engagement that the consortium must prioritize during the PCR development phase? Option A. Primarily focusing on obtaining endorsements from the largest manufacturing members of the consortium to expedite the PCR approval process and reduce administrative overhead. Option B. Engaging stakeholders solely after the PCRs have been finalized and verified to present the completed work and gather general comments on the overall presentation. Option C. Establishing a formal mechanism for soliciting and incorporating feedback from diverse stakeholder groups, including environmental advocacy organizations, regulatory bodies, and end users of the insulation materials, on the selection of environmental impact categories and the methodologies for data collection and calculation. Option D. Limiting stakeholder consultation to technical experts within the manufacturing industry to ensure the PCRs are scientifically rigorous and technically feasible for producers. The correct answer is C. Establishing a formal mechanism for soliciting and incorporating feedback from diverse stakeholder groups, including environmental advocacy organizations, regulatory bodies, and end users of the insulation materials, on the selection of environmental impact categories and the methodologies for data collection and calculation. Explanation: the core principle of stakeholder engagement in the context of ISO 14025-2006 Type Roman III environmental declarations, EPD, is to ensure transparency, credibility, and relevance of the environmental information. Stakeholders, encompassing a broad range of interested parties such as consumers, industry associations, government bodies, NGO, and scientific experts, must have opportunities to provide input throughout the EPD development and verification process. This engagement is crucial for identifying potential issues, clarifying data, and building trust in the declared environmental performance of a product or service. The standard emphasizes that the program operator for Type Roman III EPDs should establish a process for stakeholder consultation. This consultation should occur at key stages, including the development of the Product Category Rules, PCR, the EPD verification process, and potentially during the review of EPDs for existing products. The objective is to gather diverse perspectives and ensure that the EPD system is robust and meets the needs of its intended users. Without meaningful stakeholder input, the EPD might lack comprehensiveness, be perceived as biased, or fail to address critical environmental aspects relevant to different user groups, thereby undermining its utility and acceptance. Therefore, a structured approach to engaging these parties is fundamental to the integrity of the Type Roman III EPD system. Question 17. Consider a manufacturer preparing a Type Roman III environmental declaration for a new line of building insulation materials, adhering to ISO 14025-2006. The product development team is debating the most appropriate set of environmental performance indicators, EPI, to include. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles and procedures outlined in ISO 14025-2006 for selecting and presenting EPIs in this context? Option A. Include a mix of EPIs, some based on scientific life cycle assessment and others on qualitative assessments of environmental management practices, with the intention of providing a holistic, albeit less directly comparable, view of the product's environmental performance. Option B. Focus solely on EPIs related to energy consumption during the manufacturing phase, as this is the most controllable aspect for the company, and omit any EPIs concerning raw material extraction or end-of-life disposal due to data availability challenges. Option C. Select a comprehensive suite of EPIs that cover a broad range of potential environmental impacts across the product's entire life cycle, ensuring each EPI is clearly defined, quantifiable, and calculated using a consistent, recognized life cycle assessment methodology, and presented in a standardized unit for comparability. Option D. Prioritize EPIs that highlight the product's positive environmental attributes, even if they are not the most significant environmental impacts across the full life cycle, and present them using proprietary metrics to emphasize unique benefits. The correct answer is D. Prioritize EPIs that highlight the product's positive environmental attributes, even if they are not the most significant environmental impacts across the full life cycle, and present them using proprietary metrics to emphasize unique benefits. Explanation. The core principle of ISO 14025-2006 regarding environmental performance indicators, EPI, in Type Roman III environmental declarations, EPD, is that they must be relevant, quantifiable, and based on a life cycle perspective. Specifically, the standard emphasizes that EPIs should reflect significant environmental impacts and be presented in a clear, comparable, and verifiable manner. The selection and presentation of EPIs are guided by the principles of transparency and credibility, ensuring that the information provided to stakeholders is meaningful and supports informed decision-making. The process of defining EPIs for a Type Roman III EPD involves identifying relevant environmental categories, establishing clear definitions and calculation methodologies for each indicator, and ensuring that these indicators are consistent across similar product categories to facilitate comparability, as mandated by the standard's principles for Type Roman III EPDs. The standard does not dictate specific numerical targets for EPIs, but rather the framework for their selection and reporting to ensure environmental information is credible. Question 18. When developing a Type Roman III environmental declaration for a novel composite building material, a critical aspect involves establishing a meaningful benchmark for performance comparison. If the intent is to showcase the material's improved environmental profile against existing market alternatives, what fundamental requirement must be met for the benchmarking data presented within the EPD to be compliant with ISO 14025-2006 principles regarding comparability and transparency? Option A. The benchmark should be an average of the top 3 performing products in the market, as identified by a third-party certification body, without requiring disclosure of the specific methodology. Option B. The benchmark must be clearly defined, utilizing the same functional unit and system boundaries as the EPD, and the methodology for comparison must be explicitly stated. Option C. The benchmark can be based on a hypothetical product with ideal environmental characteristics, provided the declaration highlights the potential for improvement. Option D. The benchmark can be derived from a simplified LCA that excludes certain impact categories deemed less relevant to the specific product's market to streamline the comparison. Correct answer is B. The benchmark must be clearly defined, utilizing the same functional unit and system boundaries as the EPD, and the methodology for comparison must be explicitly stated. Explanation: the core principle of Type Roman III Environmental Declarations (EPD) under ISO 14025 is to provide quantified environmental information for products or services based on life cycle assessment (LCA). Benchmarking in this context involves comparing the environmental performance of a product or service against a reference point, such as industry averages, best-in-class products, or previous versions of the same product. ISO 14025 specifies that EPDs should present data in a clear, comparable, and verifiable manner. For benchmarking, the declaration must clearly define the reference point and the methodology used for comparison. This ensures that consumers and stakeholders can accurately interpret the performance data. Without a clearly defined benchmark and consistent methodology, comparisons can be misleading. The standard emphasizes transparency in data reporting, including the LCA methodology, system boundaries, and data sources. When presenting benchmarking data, it is crucial to avoid making unsubstantiated claims or implying superiority without a robust and transparent basis for comparison, adhering to the principles of fair and honest communication. The comparison must be based on the same functional unit and system boundaries as the EPD itself. Question 19. Consider the development of a Type Roman III environmental declaration for a novel bioplastic packaging material. The project team has completed a comprehensive life cycle assessment (LCA) that rigorously followed the principles outlined in ISO 14040 and ISO 14044. Which of the following is the most critical determining factor for the successful registration and communication of this declaration under ISO 14025-2006? Option A: the independent verification of the LCA results and the EPD by a qualified third party. Option B: the alignment of the environmental performance indicators with national advertising standards. Option C: the exclusive use of primary data collected directly from the manufacturing facility. Option D: the inclusion of detailed marketing claims and competitive comparisons within the EPD. The correct answer is A: the independent verification of the LCA results and the EPD by a qualified third party. Explanation: the core principle of ISO 14025-2006 concerning Type Roman III environmental declarations (EPD) is that they are based on a life cycle assessment (LCA). An LCA is a systematic process for evaluating the environmental aspects and potential impacts associated with a product, process, or service throughout its entire life cycle. This includes raw material extraction, manufacturing, distribution, use, and end-of-life treatment. ISO 14025 mandates that the LCA conducted for an EPD must adhere to the principles and requirements of ISO 14040 and ISO 14044, which provide the foundational framework for conducting LCAs. These standards emphasize the importance of transparency, comparability, and scientific rigor. The goal is to provide objective, verifiable, and comprehensive environmental information to stakeholders, enabling informed decision-making. Therefore, the validity and credibility of a Type Roman III EPD are intrinsically linked to the quality and adherence to LCA standards of the underlying assessment. The selection of a functional unit, the definition of system boundaries, the data collection methodology, and the impact assessment categories are all critical components derived from the LCA process that directly influence the EPD's content and its ability to support environmental claims. Question 20. Consider a scenario where a manufacturer of composite building materials, which has an existing Type Roman III environmental declaration, EPD, compliant with ISO 14025-2006, implements a new closed-loop water recycling system in its primary production facility. The system is projected to reduce overall water consumption by 25% and decrease effluent discharge by 30% per unit of product. The original EPD quantified environmental impacts based on the previous water management practices. According to the principles and procedures outlined in ISO 14025-2006, concerning the monitoring and evaluation of environmental performance. What is the most appropriate course of action for the manufacturer regarding its EPD? Option A. Initiate a review and potential update of the EPD to reflect the revised environmental performance data resulting from the new water recycling system. Option B. Continue using the existing EPD without modification, as the changes primarily relate to operational efficiency rather than core product composition. Option C. Publish a supplementary document detailing the new water recycling system, but maintain the original EPD as the primary environmental information source. Option D. Conduct a new Comprehensive Life Cycle Assessment, LCA, from scratch and publish a completely new EPD, disregarding the previous declaration entirely. The correct answer is A. Initiate a review and potential update of the EPD to reflect the revised environmental performance data resulting from the new water recycling system. Explanation: the core principle of Type Roman III environmental declarations, EPD, under ISO 14025-2006 is to provide quantified environmental information based on a life cycle assessment, LCA, for a product or service. The monitoring and evaluation of environmental performance, as stipulated by the standard, is crucial for ensuring the credibility and accuracy of these declarations over time. This involves establishing a system for tracking key environmental indicators that were quantified in the original LCA and reported in the EPD. When a product's manufacturing process undergoes significant changes, such as the introduction of a new energy-efficient technology or a substantial alteration in raw material sourcing, the environmental performance metrics are likely to be affected. ISO 14025-2006 mandates that such changes necessitate a review and potential update of the EPD. The standard emphasizes that the EPD should reflect the current environmental performance of the product. Therefore, if the new technology leads to a 15% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions per functional unit and a 10% decrease in water consumption, these changes must be incorporated. The process of updating an EPD typically involves re-evaluating the LCA data to reflect the revised production methods, and then re-verifying the updated declaration. The goal is to maintain the EPD as a relevant and reliable communication tool, aligning with the principles of transparency and comparability inherent in Type Roman III declarations. This continuous improvement cycle ensures that stakeholders receive up-to-date and accurate environmental information. Question 21. Consider a scenario where a manufacturer of biodegradable packaging materials has developed a Type Roman III environmental declaration in accordance with ISO 14025-2006. The declaration claims a significant reduction in greenhouse gas emissions compared to conventional plastics based on a life cycle assessment, LCA. During the verification process, the independent verifier discovers that the LCA methodology used, while generally sound, did not fully account for the emissions associated with the end-of-life phase of the biodegradable material under specific, less common disposal conditions, e.g., anaerobic landfilling, which can lead to methane production. The verifier also notes that the PCR used for this product category has not been updated in several years and may not fully capture emerging disposal pathways relevant to newer biodegradable formulations. What is the most appropriate course of action for the verification body in this situation, according to the principles of ISO 14025-2006? Option A. Require the manufacturer to revise the LCA to include a more comprehensive analysis of all relevant end-of-life scenarios as defined by the PCR, and if a suitable PCR does not exist, recommend the development of an updated PCR to ensure the declaration's accuracy and comparability. Option B. Suggest the manufacturer remove all end-of-life impact data from the declaration, focusing only on manufacturing and transport impacts to avoid the complexity of disposal scenarios. Option C. Reject the declaration outright due to the potential for misleading information, advising the manufacturer to restart the entire EPD development process with a newly established PCR. Option D. Approve the declaration as is, with a note indicating the specific end-of-life scenarios that were not fully modeled, assuming the primary disposal pathways are adequately covered. Correct answer is A. Require the manufacturer to revise the LCA to include a more comprehensive analysis of all relevant end-of-life scenarios as defined by the PCR. And if a suitable PCR does not exist, recommend the development of an updated PCR to ensure the declaration's accuracy and comparability. Explanation: the core principle of verification for a Type III environmental declaration under ISO 14025-2006 is ensuring that the underlying environmental data and the methodology used to generate it are robust, credible, and conform to the standards requirements. This involves a critical assessment of the Product Category Rules (PCR) and the Specific Environmental Product Declaration (EPD) itself. The verification process must confirm that the data presented in the EPD accurately reflects the environmental performance of the product or service throughout its life cycle, as defined by the relevant PCR. Key aspects include the selection of appropriate impact assessment methods, the quality and traceability of input data, and the calculation procedures. The verification body, which must be independent and competent, reviews the entire process, from data collection and analysis to the final EPD report. This ensures that the declaration is reliable and provides meaningful, comparable environmental information to stakeholders, facilitating informed purchasing decisions. The verification does not, however, guarantee the absolute environmental superiority of the product, but rather the accuracy and transparency of the declared information according to the established framework. Question 22. When establishing a Type III environmental declaration program in accordance with ISO 14025-2006, what is the most critical aspect of stakeholder engagement to ensure the program's credibility and the utility of the resulting declarations for informed decision-making by diverse user groups? Option A. Focusing communication efforts solely on technical experts and regulatory bodies to ensure the scientific accuracy and legal compliance of the declarations. Option B. A post-publication review period where stakeholders can submit feedback on existing declarations without prior involvement in their development. Option C. Exclusive engagement with industry associations to streamline the declaration process and ensure manufacturer buy-in, thereby maximizing the number of EPDs issued. Option D. Proactive and transparent consultation with all relevant stakeholder groups during the development of program rules and product category rules to gather input on environmental performance indicators and methodologies. The correct answer is D. Proactive and transparent consultation with all relevant stakeholder groups during the development of program rules and product category rules to gather input on environmental performance indicators and methodologies. Explanation: the core principle of Type III environmental declarations, EPD, under ISO 14025-2006 is transparency and the provision of credible, verifiable environmental information. Stakeholder engagement is crucial for the development and acceptance of these declarations. This involves identifying relevant stakeholders, such as manufacturers, consumers, regulatory bodies, and environmental organizations, and involving them throughout the EPD lifecycle. The process of engaging stakeholders aims to ensure that the EPD program and its resulting declarations are relevant, credible, and understandable to the intended audience. This includes gathering input on the selection of environmental indicators, the methodology for data collection and calculation, the verification process, and the communication strategy. Effective communication ensures that the EPD's information is accessible and comprehensible, allowing stakeholders to make informed decisions. The standard emphasizes that the development of EPDs should be an open and participatory process. A key aspect is the establishment of a program operator that oversees the development and management of EPDs, ensuring adherence to the standard's principles. This operator is responsible for defining the rules for the product category, which includes specifying the environmental performance indicators and the calculation procedures. The engagement of stakeholders, particularly through consultation on the program's rules and the development of product category rules, PCR, is fundamental to building trust and ensuring the EPD system's integrity. This proactive involvement helps to address potential concerns and biases, leading to more robust and widely accepted environmental declarations. The ultimate goal is to facilitate market-based approaches to environmental improvement by providing reliable data on the environmental performance of products and services. Question 23. A manufacturer of composite building materials is developing a Type Roman III environmental declaration according to ISO 14025-2006. Their initial life cycle assessment data indicates a significant reduction in volatile organic compound (VOC) emissions during the manufacturing phase compared to industry averages, but a higher energy consumption during the product's use phase due to its insulating properties. To present this information in the declaration without creating a misleading impression, which approach best aligns with the standard's principles for avoiding deceptive environmental claims. Option A. Presenting the reduced VOC emissions as the primary environmental benefit on the front of the declaration, with a footnote directing users to a separate section for detailed use phase energy data. Option B. Clearly stating the quantified environmental impacts for both VOC emissions and energy consumption across all relevant life cycle stages, ensuring the comparability of data sets and avoiding unsubstantiated environmental superiority claims. Option C. Aggregating all environmental impacts into a single composite score that favors the lower VOC emissions, without explicitly detailing the trade-offs in energy consumption. Option D. Highlighting the positive environmental aspect of reduced VOCs, and omitting any mention of increased energy consumption during the use phase to maintain a favorable overall environmental profile. The correct answer is A. Presenting the reduced VOC emissions as the primary environmental benefit on the front of the declaration, with a footnote directing users to a separate section for detailed use phase energy data. Explanation: ISO 14025-2006, concerning Type Roman III environmental declarations, emphasizes transparency and comparability of environmental information. Core principle is to avoid misleading claims, which is particularly relevant when presenting aggregated environmental performance data. The standard requires that the underlying data used for the declaration be robust, verifiable, and representative of the product's life cycle. Furthermore, the presentation of results must be clear and avoid any implication of environmental superiority that is not substantiated by the data. When comparing products, the comparability of the underlying data sets and the methodology used is paramount. The standard mandates that the environmental impacts presented in a Type Roman III declaration are quantified and communicated through a program operator. The program operator's role is to ensure that the declarations are prepared according to the standard, and that the information presented is factual and not deceptive. This includes verifying that the environmental performance claims are based on a comprehensive life cycle assessment, LCA, and that the results are communicated in a manner that allows consumers and other stakeholders to make informed decisions. Misleading claims can arise from selective reporting of data, inappropriate aggregation of impacts, or the use of vague or unsubstantiated environmental descriptors. Therefore, adherence to the principles of clarity, accuracy, and comparability in data presentation is essential to prevent misleading information. Question 24. A manufacturer developing a Type Roman III environmental declaration for new composite building material encounters a data gap for the energy consumption during the transportation phase of a specific raw material sourced from a remote region. The available secondary data for this transportation mode is from a different geographical context and has a higher associated uncertainty. According to ISO 14025-2006 principles for addressing data gaps and uncertainties in environmental declarations, what is the most appropriate approach for the manufacturer to ensure the integrity and transparency of the EPD? Option A. Commission extensive new primary data collection for the specific transportation route, even if it significantly delays the EPD publication and incurs substantial costs. To eliminate all potential uncertainties, Option B. Document the data gap. Clearly state the source and limitations of the secondary data used for the transportation phase, and explain the methodology for estimating the environmental impacts, including the justification for using data from a different geographical context. Option C. Utilize the most conservative worst-case scenario, available secondary data for the transportation phase without explicitly mentioning the data gap or the source of the data, to ensure the product's environmental profile is not overstated. Option D. Exclude the transportation phase from the EPD altogether to avoid presenting potentially inaccurate information, focusing only on processes where complete primary data is available. The correct answer is B. Document the data gap. clearly state the source and limitations of the secondary data used for the transportation phase, and explain the methodology for estimating the environmental impacts, including the justification for using data from a different geographical context. Explanation: the core principle for addressing data gaps and uncertainties in Type Roman III environmental declarations, EPD, under ISO 14025-2006 involves transparency and justification. When primary data is unavailable or insufficient for certain life cycle inventory (LCI) processes, the standard mandates the use of appropriate secondary data. However, the selection and application of this secondary data must be clearly documented and justified within the EPD. This includes detailing the source of the secondary data, its relevance to the declared product or service, and any limitations or assumptions made during its use. Furthermore, the EPD must explicitly state the presence of data gaps and the methods employed to manage the associated uncertainties. This ensures that users of the EPD can critically evaluate the reliability and completeness of the environmental information provided. The objective is not to eliminate all uncertainty, but to manage and communicate it responsibly, allowing for informed decision-making. The standard emphasizes that the overall quality of the EPD is influenced by the rigor of the data selection, the transparency in handling gaps, and the clear communication of any remaining uncertainties to the end user. The intent is to maintain the credibility of the EPD as a reliable tool for environmental performance comparison. Question 25. Consider the development of a Type Roman III environmental declaration for a novel bioplastic packaging material, which foundational principle, derived from the overarching ISO 14025-2006 framework, is most critical to ensuring the declaration's validity and comparability with other similar products, particularly concerning the quantification of environmental impacts. Option A. The declaration must include a comparative assertion against a competitor's product to demonstrate superior environmental performance. Option B. The declaration's development process should prioritize cost-effectiveness over the comprehensiveness of the environmental data collected. Option C. The declaration's primary focus should be on communicating a single, most significant environmental benefit to consumers. Option D. The declaration must be underpinned by a robust life cycle assessment, conducted in accordance with relevant ISO 14040 and ISO 14044 standards. The correct answer is D. The declaration must be underpinned by a robust life cycle assessment conducted in accordance with relevant ISO 14040 and ISO 14044 standards. Explanation: the fundamental principle of ISO 14025-2006 regarding Type Roman III environmental declarations is that they are based on a life cycle assessment (LCA) methodology. The LCA, as defined by ISO 14040 and ISO 14044, provides the quantitative data for the environmental performance of a product or service. For a Type Roman III declaration, this LCA must be conducted according to specific principles and procedures to ensure comparability and credibility. Key elements include defining the goal and scope of the study, conducting an inventory analysis (LCI), performing an impact assessment (LCA), and interpreting the results. The standard emphasizes transparency, verification by a third party, and the use of standardized environmental performance indicators. The credibility of a Type Roman III declaration hinges on the robustness and adherence to these LCA principles and procedures. Therefore, the most critical underlying principle for a Type Roman III environmental declaration under ISO 14025-2006 is the rigorous application of a comprehensive life cycle assessment. Question 26. When developing a Type Roman III environmental declaration for a novel composite material used in aerospace manufacturing, which combination of data quality indicators, as defined by ISO 14025-2006, will be most critical to address to ensure the declaration's integrity and comparability with other advanced material EPDs? Considering the potential for proprietary process variations and the need to capture the full material lifecycle from raw extraction to end-of-life recycling or disposal. Option A. Focusing on completeness of the product category rules, PCR documentation, ensuring accuracy of the visual design of the EPD, and demonstrating representativeness of the target market for the material. Option B. ensuring completeness of the life cycle inventory, accuracy of the impact assessment calculations, and representativeness of the data to the specific composite materials production processes. Option C, emphasizing accuracy of the secondary data sources, ensuring completeness of the regulatory compliance statements, and demonstrating representativeness of the marketing claims made for the material. Option D, prioritizing accuracy of the primary energy consumption data, ensuring representativeness of the transportation modes used, and demonstrating completeness of the end-of-life scenario modeling. Correct answer is B, ensuring completeness of the life cycle inventory, accuracy of the impact assessment calculations, and representativeness of the data to the specific composite materials production processes. Explanation: ISO 14025-2006, specifically in its principles for Type Roman III environmental declarations, EPD, mandates rigorous data quality. The standard outlines several key indicators for assessing this data. Completeness refers to the extent to which all relevant environmental impacts across the product's life cycle are accounted for, without significant omissions. Accuracy pertains to the degree to which the data reflects the true environmental performance, meaning it is free from material error or bias. Representativeness ensures that the data accurately reflects the typical environmental performance of the product or service category it describes, often achieved through the use of average data or specific, well-justified product data. The standard emphasizes that these indicators are crucial for the credibility and comparability of Type Roman III EPDs. For instance, if a significant life cycle stage of a product, like end-of-life treatment, is not included in the assessment, lack of completeness, the EPD would not accurately represent the product's overall environmental footprint. Similarly, using outdated or biased data would compromise accuracy, and presenting data for a highly specialized niche product as representative of the entire market segment would undermine representativeness. Therefore, ensuring high levels of completeness, accuracy, and representativeness is fundamental to meeting the requirements of ISO 14025-2006 for Type Roman III EPDs. Question 27. When auditing a Type Roman III environmental declaration for a composite wood product, what specific aspect of the verification process under ISO 14025-2006 is paramount to ensure the declaration accurately reflects the product's environmental performance in relation to its established environmental product category rules? Option A, the verifier's assessment of the data collection protocols and the integrity of the life cycle inventory analysis supporting the declaration, ensuring alignment with the chosen PCR's requirements for data quality and system boundaries. Option B, the verifier's evaluation of the product's end-of-life management options, regardless of whether these were included in the original PCR or the life cycle assessment. Option C, the verifier's review of the marketing claims made on the product packaging, ensuring they are not misleading and do not contradict the environmental declaration. Option D, the verifier's confirmation that the declaration document is formatted according to the specific template provided by the National Environmental Agency. Correct answer is A, the verifier's assessment of the data collection protocols and the integrity of the life cycle inventory analysis supporting the declaration, ensuring alignment with the chosen PCR's requirements for data quality and system boundaries. Explanation: the verification of a Type Roman III environmental declaration under ISO 14025-2006 is a critical process to ensure the credibility and accuracy of the environmental information presented. The scope of this verification is not limited to just the final declaration document itself. It must encompass the entire life cycle of the product or service as reflected in the Environmental Product Category Rules, PCR, and the underlying data used to generate the declaration. This includes scrutinizing the data collection methodologies, the life cycle assessment, LCA, performed, the calculations, and the interpretation of results. Furthermore, the verification must confirm that the declaration adheres to the principles and procedures outlined in ISO 14025, including transparency, comparability, and relevance. A key objective is to ensure that the declaration provides reliable and comparable environmental information to stakeholders, enabling informed decision-making. This involves assessing whether the declaration is consistent with the chosen PCR and whether the PCR itself is robust and appropriate for the product category. The verification process also aims to confirm that the third-party verifier possesses the necessary competence and independence, as stipulated by the standard, to conduct the audit effectively. The scope, therefore, extends to the competence and independence of the verifier, the applicability and adherence to the PCR, the quality of the underlying data and LCA, and the overall compliance with the requirements of ISO 14025. Question 28. Consider a multinational corporation seeking to enhance the environmental credibility of its product line through the implementation of Type Roman III environmental declarations in accordance with ISO 14025-2006. Which of the following most accurately reflects a core objective of adopting such declarations within the framework of this standard, beyond mere regulatory compliance? Option A. Simplify the product development process by reducing the need for detailed life cycle assessments, focusing instead on marketing claims. Option B. To fulfill the minimum requirements of national environmental legislation, ensuring the company avoids penalties without actively promoting product environmental performance. Option C. To provide quantified, verified, and comparable environmental information to stakeholders, thereby enabling informed decision-making and driving market-based environmental improvements. Option D. To solely achieve a competitive advantage by prominently displaying a generic, eco-friendly label on all products, regardless of specific quantified impacts. The correct answer is C. To provide quantified, verified, and comparable environmental information to stakeholders, thereby enabling informed decision-making and driving market-based environmental improvements. Explanation. ISO 14025-2006 establishes the framework for Type Roman III environmental declarations, which are voluntary programs that provide quantified environmental information based on life cycle assessment, LCA. The primary goal of these declarations is to facilitate informed purchasing decisions by providing objective, comparable, and verifiable environmental data. This transparency allows consumers, businesses, and public authorities to understand the environmental impacts of products and services across their entire life cycle. A key objective is to encourage market-driven improvements in environmental performance by highlighting products with lower environmental footprints. This standard emphasizes the importance of establishing clear program principles, procedures, and verification mechanisms to ensure the credibility and reliability of the declared information, thereby fostering trust and promoting environmental responsibility throughout the supply chain. It also aims to support the development of consistent methodologies for environmental data reporting, aligning with broader environmental policy objectives and international standards. Question 29. When developing a Type Roman III environmental declaration for a new line of biodegradable packaging materials, what is the primary function of the independent third-party verification process as stipulated by ISO 14025-2006 principles and procedures? Option A. Provide recommendations for improving the product's environmental performance beyond the scope of the initial life cycle assessment. Option B. To confirm that the environmental data presented in the declaration accurately reflects the product's life cycle impacts, and that the declaration adheres to the specified product category rules and the standards requirements. Option C. To certify that the product is fully compliant with all relevant national and international environmental protection laws and regulations. Option D. To conduct a comprehensive market analysis to assess the competitive positioning of the EPD-compliant packaging materials. The correct answer is B. To confirm that the environmental data presented in the declaration accurately reflects the product's life cycle impacts, and that the declaration adheres to the specified product category rules and the standards requirements. Explanation. ISO 14025-2006, specifically in the context of Type Roman III environmental declarations, EPD, mandates rigorous data validation and verification procedures to ensure the credibility and reliability of the environmental information presented. The standard emphasizes that the data underpinning an EPD must be scientifically sound, traceable, and verifiable. This process involves multiple layers of scrutiny. Firstly, data validation is crucial. This entails checking the data for accuracy, completeness, consistency, and relevance to the declared environmental performance of the product or service. It ensures that the data collected adheres to the established methodology and that any assumptions made are clearly documented and justified. Secondly, verification is conducted by an independent third party. This external review assesses whether the EPD and its underlying data comply with the requirements of ISO 14025-2006, the relevant product category rules (PCR), and any other applicable standards or regulations. The verifier examines the data validation process, the life cycle assessment (LCA) study, and the final EPD document to confirm that the declared environmental information is accurate and presented transparently. This independent verification is a cornerstone of the EPD system, building trust among stakeholders and ensuring that the EPD serves its intended purpose of communicating comparable and reliable environmental performance information. The verification process typically involves a review of documentation, site visits if necessary, and interviews with the product manufacturer and LCA practitioners. The ultimate goal is to confirm that the EPD accurately reflects the environmental impacts of the product throughout its life cycle, as determined by the LCA. Question 30. When establishing the verification and validation framework for a Type Roman III environmental declaration according to ISO 14025-2006, what is the primary objective regarding the independence of the verifying entity and the scope of their review? Option A. To guarantee that the verifying entity possesses the most extensive knowledge of the product's manufacturing process, allowing for a thorough technical validation of all production stages. Option B. To confirm that the verifying entity is a government regulatory body, thereby ensuring compliance with national environmental laws and standardizing the declaration format. Option C. To ascertain that the verifying entity has prior experience with similar environmental labels, focusing solely on the clarity and presentation of the final EPD document for consumer understanding. Option D. To ensure the verifying entity is free from any commercial or financial interest in the product or its manufacturer, and that their review encompasses the EPD document, the underlying LCA study, and adherence to the applicable product category rules. Correct answer is D. To ensure the verifying entity is free from any commercial or financial interest in the product or its manufacturer, and that their review encompasses the EPD document, the underlying LCA study, and adherence to the applicable product category rules. Explanation. The verification and validation process for a Type Roman III environmental declaration, EPD, under ISO 14025-2006 is crucial for ensuring the credibility and reliability of the environmental information presented. Verification confirms that the EPD has been prepared in accordance with the standard and relevant product category rules, PCR. Validation, on the other hand, ensures the accuracy and completeness of the data within the EPD, including the underlying life cycle assessment, LCA, data. The standard mandates that the verification process should be conducted by an independent third party. This independent body assesses the EPD document itself, the underlying LCA study, and the PCR used. Key aspects of this assessment include checking the methodology, data quality, calculations, and the consistency of the declared environmental information. The outcome of a successful verification and validation is the issuance of a certificate or statement of verification, which attests to the conformity of the EPD. This process is fundamental to the integrity of Type Roman III EPDs, distinguishing them from self-declared environmental claims and providing assurance to stakeholders about the environmental performance information. It directly addresses the need for transparency and comparability in environmental declarations, aligning with principles of environmental management systems and eco-labeling frameworks.